Indiana News Desk is made possible in part by Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, on the web at lawngp.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson, attorneys at law since 1949, utilizing experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana News Desk, an immigrant with no criminal record is back in Bloomington after being detained for more than 2 months by immigration and custom enforcement officials.
He said that it was mentally really hard for him, especially the first couple weeks.
Protesters in Bloomington have been rallying against immigration action by the Trump administration. Budget cuts at the statehouse mean the elimination of the Jobs for America's Graduates program at our area high schools.
What I have seen from students who have gone through the JAG program is just a growth in confidence, growth in their abilities to navigate the world.
The program will be phased out after this school year. And we look back at the life of Hall of Fame Bloomington sports writer Bob Hammel. We'll have these stories and more right now on Indiana News Desk. Welcome to Indiana News Desk. I'm Perry Metz, sitting in for the vacationing Joe Wren. Earlier this year, we spoke to family members of Aharon Rosales, who was one of more than 20 men detained by federal immigration authorities in southern Indiana this spring. Now Rosales is out on bond. As our Bente Bouthier reports, his arrest and release coincide with community pushback against the national rise in immigration arrests over the last several months.
Last Thursday, more than 200 Monroe County residents gathered to protest actions of the Trump administration, including a doubling of immigration arrests this spring. Organizers last week said the approach is inhumane and targets people in the country who don't have criminal records.
No borders, no nations, stop the deportation.
According to data gathered by NBC News, about 57,000 people are being held in ICE detention, and more than 70% don't have a criminal record. The most common offenses for people in these circumstances are immigration and traffic-related. And that's the case for Aharon Rosales, who's back with his family in Bloomington after being detained by ICE in April and taken to a detention facility in Kentucky. His mom and sister spoke with WTIU then and said Rosales wasn't the type of person they thought ICE was looking for.
He's very warm-hearted and very hardworking too, yes, especially because of his children. Of course, they're in a country where the economy, it's not going really well for citizens. And the reason we moved to the United States is because we were struggling financially over there. So, of course, all the hard work that he puts in, it's so he can send money over for his children and their food and school.
Aharon doesn't have a criminal record. His mom was driving him and a co-worker, Manuel Sente-Tivelen, to work as painters when ICE pulled them over. Aharon's sister, Eli, translates what happened. ICE agents were looking for Aharon's co-worker, Sente-Tivelen, who had pending charges in Monroe County. But they asked Aharon for his ID too and saw he was undocumented.
So then the officer said, okay, then you're coming with us too.
When he got to the Hopkins County Jail, officers told him he would have to stay.
No se ambienta It
was mentally really hard for him, especially the first couple weeks. And it takes a lot of strength to be in there. It felt like a mental torture.
Aaron describes extremely uncomfortable conditions. Lights on at all hours, limited food, a thin pad for a mattress, only warm tap water for drinking.
There was a lot of people in there crying every day because they wanted to get out. And even if they wanted to get processed for deportation, they still had to wait some time to get deported.
His co-worker, Sente Tevelan, was eventually processed and voluntarily deported to Mexico. Aaron says the only redeeming thing about his time in jail were the calls with his family. Aaron says many men didn't have the resources to make calls. He's grateful his mom and sister found a lawyer, Christy Pop, to gather documentation for his case and to prove he wasn't a flight risk.
She wanted to collect a lot of letters from the company he works for, from relatives, friends.
Indiana has more than 50,000 immigration court cases pending, according to data kept by trackreports.org. More than 2,400 cases have been filed so far this year.
You have to work really hard to show ties to a community, that there's somebody there who's willing to ensure that they go to court, that they have applied for status if that's what they're going to do.
Of pending cases in Indiana, only 83 are criminal or national security related. More than 25,000 are entry without inspection, and 27,000 are other immigration charges. About 460 of these cases are for someone in Monroe County. Pop adds any criminal record can hurt your chances with an immigration judge. Aaron says his case was one of the only ones granted bail, which the judge set at $10,000.
It was unbelievable for him because there is no way out for a lot of people.
Aaron isn't sure how long he'll be able to stay in the U.S. and is applying for a work visa now.
Maybe this can be a lesson for us as well, to follow the rules and do everything by the book without being irresponsible, because it can affect the people that are not doing these offenses.
Most people he met at Hopkins County Jail had minor offenses, like traffic infractions, following the national trend. He says it's his faith in God that's brought him this far.
They were all workers, like they were all here in U.S. to work. And because maybe one person decided, like, committed something terrible out of their country, then it affects everybody else.
Aaron was one of at least 4 men detained in Bloomington at the end of April in what an ICE press release called a multi-agency operation. A grassroots group, Blue Mare, tracked federal agents' presence in Bloomington. Last month, it hosted a vigil for people who had been detained or deported and presented information on people's rights.
Things that you need to give a police officer if they were to stop you on the street would be, or stop you in a car, would be your name and your date of birth and your address.
We will walk with you, and sing your spirit.
For Indiana News Desk, I'm Benta Boutier.
TrackReports.org says the highest number of ICE detainees in Indiana are being incarcerated in Clay County. It's been 5 years since the COVID pandemic exploded across the world, and while it's long since been a pandemic, the virus continues to mutate and remains dangerous. The latest data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention suggests that another spike in COVID cases is on the way this summer. We're joined now by Graham McKean, a public and environmental health expert and the former IU Director of Public Health. Welcome to the show, Graham.
Thanks, Barry.
How is the CDC determining that a surge is on the way?
The CDC mainly looks at three major metrics. The first one being wastewater surveillance. That's our best leading indicator, and that can tell us the first signs of a surge before you'd see it clinically. Also can tell us when we peak and when we're past that surge. Next, we also look at positivity rates. There's not a lot of testing going on, but those that are being tested, those rates are being tracked. And so the higher percentage of positive tests means there's higher cases in the community, right? And then lastly, ER visits. So they're looking at hospitalizations and ER visits for COVID-19. And so we're starting to see those three metrics pop up mainly in the South and mainly in the Western United States right now. In Indiana, we're starting to see just the very beginning of a little bit of a summer bump. And I think we'll have a small one here soon. And we're seeing that in the wastewater now.
It seems public awareness or concern about COVID has really dwindled. Is that the case?
I would say yes, unless you're immunocompromised, unless you're high risk, you may not be thinking about this anymore, and I understand that, but it is still a risk, and that risk has kind of changed over time too, and I think now we're looking at longer term risks to younger people, accumulating effects from repeat infections, as we know that this virus can damage almost every system of the body, including the immune system, or our cognitive damage as well, so there's still a lot of utility in avoiding infection and being aware.
The federal and state governments no longer track cases, and Indiana has dropped much of the funding for local health departments. How does that affect dealing with COVID?
It not only affects COVID, it affects everything, right? And it affects us for the next emerging pathogen as well. But the federal government has cut tens of millions of dollars to the state already. And then, as you said, the state has been cutting millions of dollars from our just recent historic investment we had just in public health a few years ago. Prior to Health First Indiana, the state was investing $8 million a year. Last year was $75 million. This year, $150. Now, due to the budget shortfall and due to the political climate around public health and following the pandemic, that's only $40 million for 26 and 27 combined. And so these things need long-term investments for long-term solutions, and this is not a way to make Hoosiers healthier.
What about vaccines? Are they still available?
Fortunately, yes, vaccines are still available. Last fall's formula is still out there, and you can get that now. They are, as far as we know, still going to tweak that vaccine for this fall, so look out for that. It will not be available in time for the summer bump here. But also, if folks are looking for alternative to mRNA vaccines, Novavax, a protein-based vaccine, just got full FDA approval. So now we need people to get them.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Graham McKean, former IU Director of Public Health and a public health expert. Jobs for America's Graduates, or JAG, prepares Hoosier high schoolers for a career, college, or the military. It's a highly successful dropout prevention program with thousands of graduates. But as Aubrey Wright reports, the state of Indiana has cut the funding.
JAG was founded in 2006 to help remove barriers to graduation. And it worked. 97% of JAG students earned their high school diploma. But this year, the legislature cut the program's funding, citing a tight budget. Without state funding, schools will cut the program and its staff.
We are going to have to utilize the program as best as we can while we have it, but then also think about how we sunset that in the appropriate way.
The cuts were a huge hit for Eastern Green High School, which already had about 30 to 40 students enrolled in the program. JAG focused on building skills employers want to see with hands-on learning and volunteering. It was created for 11th and 12th graders, and a specialist would continue to work with students 1 year after graduation. Now, Kirkendall and other school leaders are trying to preserve that support without funding.
What I have seen from students who have gone through the JAG program is just a growth in confidence, growth in their abilities to navigate the world.
For Indiana News Desk, I'm Aubrey Wright.
Indiana Education Secretary Katie Jenner encourages schools to work with their region's workforce boards or to find other funding sources. Eastern Green has received a grant for 1 more year. Coming up next on Indiana News Desk. Monroe County will soon have a new nature preserve on the east side, thanks to one family's donation of 400 acres of land. And we look back at the career of legendary Bloomington sports editor Bob Hammel, who passed away last weekend. These stories and more right here on Indiana News Desk.
Justice never sleeps. I don't think this was an accident.
Precisely.
Oh, God.
And all of this is being done in secret.
A project of secret keeping.
There's a connection here. We'll find out what it is. Is it murder? We need to start investigating.
You could start there. We have a match.
Time is, as they say, of the essence.
Welcome back to Indiana News Desk. We're joined now by Elise Perry for headlines from around the state.
Thanks, Perry. The average resident in Indiana is paying $28 a month more for electricity than they did last year. That's according to an analysis by Citizens Action Coalition that looked at electric bills from Indiana's 5 investor-owned utilities. The report says there are many factors driving these rate increases. Natural gas is more expensive this year. Utilities are recovering the cost of coal ash cleanups and pollution control technology at the coal plants. The Citizens Action Coalition also says Indiana utilities have cut deals with industrial users in rate increases, saddling residents with more of the costs. Protesters who gathered outside the Morgan County Justice Complex on Monday say a planned data center in Monrovia would exploit residents. In February, Morgan County commissioners approved rezoning 390 acres of land in Monrovia for an unnamed developer to build a 5-building data center campus. Many county officials signed non-disclosure agreements restricting them from discussing the project.
I think it's weird to have a development that's anonymous, like an unknown builder's coming to your town. Welcome them with open arms. No, let's find out if you're going to benefit us or not.
Residents worry that the data center could potentially sink the water table and increase energy costs for Monrovia residents. The Monroe County Council Board of Commissioners are working to address the future of the new jail project. They want to draft a letter asking state legislators to amend Senate Enrolled Act 1. The law puts a local income tax limit on county loans and is stalling funding for the jail project.
You want to have numbers, but I think we may want to be more general about here's the problem with the legislation versus here's how we're going to attack it, here's our numbers.
Monroe County is under a federal order to address overcrowding at its jail. The former Napa building in downtown Bloomington was torn down Wednesday morning, making way for expanding the Bloomington Convention Center. The building was more recently used as the county's Elections Operations Center. The Capital Improvement Board last week also said more than half of the bids are approved and the budget is on track. A new nature preserve in Monroe County will transform Bloomington's east side. The property is bordered by South Smith Road, East Moores Pike, and State Road 446. The county commissioners approved the donation from the Huntington family this week. The primary focus of the land will be wildlife management.
We're going to be planting trees, hundreds of trees, thousands of trees. We're working with Purdue University to calculate and figure out how to do all this.
The Parks Department is planning an extensive trail system on the land, using grass pathways and creating a limited nature park with recreational activities. Guided tours are planned for 2026, with full open trails expected for 2027. When the school year starts in a few days, teachers and staff at Bloomington's 2 high schools will be wearing panic buttons. The badges are the size of a debit card, twice as thick, with a single button that can be worn on a lanyard. The button can issue a staff alert or a lockdown.
To be able to prioritize the safety of your staff and then be rewarded as an administrator to help those staff members feel empowered, trusted, confident, and focused on the job that they need to do is huge.
Young says about a quarter of Indiana schools are already using the system. Buyers in the Monroe County housing market are gaining negotiating power as inventory increases. A growing number of listings has lessened bidding wars and encouraged sellers to be more flexible.
There are some homes that people are getting a little bit of a discount on. When they're on market a little longer, sellers tend to get a little more reactive and try to work with offers.
From January to June, only 66% of homes listed in Monroe County sold. That's an almost 20% decrease from the same period in 2022. And the number of Indiana high schoolers who go straight to college has reached a record low. Just 52% of Indiana high school graduates went straight to college in 2023, a slight dip from the prior year. Workers with bachelor's degrees earn far more on average than those with high school diplomas. And Perry, it's also a problem for the state. The number of Indiana residents with bachelor's degrees is already among the lowest in the country.
Thank you, Elise. Legendary sports editor Bob Hammel passed away last Saturday night at 88 years old. His career spanned 30 years at the Bloomington Herald-Times, where he covered IU sports and authored the first of more than a dozen books. But as Pat Bean reports, the relationships he made and how he told their stories made him unique in the world of journalism. Most of the material for this story comes from our 2019 WTIU documentary on Bob, which is available on our website.
The thing about Bob Hammel is that in the reams and reams of copy he wrote for the Herald-Times, he never made the story about him. And he never took pot shots at coaches or players who he said he always saw as kids.
Second guessing was never a thing I like to do because it's such an unfair perspective. You say that what the coach didn't work. Well, by inference, you're saying that if he had done it this way, it would have worked. But how do you know that? How do you know that wouldn't have failed too?
And there's no second-guessing Hammel's career. He was selected as the state Sports Writer of the Year at least 16 times and has been inducted into numerous halls of fame, including the Indiana Journalism Hall of Fame and the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame.
He was really driven to be accurate. He was driven to be fair. But I also will say, and I think anybody that ever read his stuff, he was driven to be positive.
Hammel was able to develop friendships with many national figures after arriving in Bloomington, including swimmer Mark Spitz, Congressman Lee Hamilton, entrepreneur Bill Cook, screenwriter Angelo Pizzo, and former IU basketball coach Bob Knight. His relationship with Knight began when he was hired by IU to coach in 1971 and lasted a lifetime. Hammel wrote Knight's memoir, Knight, My Story.
I'm smart enough to know when somebody's dumb and somebody's smart. And now here's a guy that's a very intelligent guy. He obviously not only likes basketball, but he understands basketball. And I think that it wasn't too long after I came to Indiana that he became a friend, and a very good friend.
Hammel also opened the door for female sports writers in the early 1970s, hiring Tracy Dodds and Kristen Huckshorn. Both went on to national prominence and founded organizations that promote women in sports media.
40 years ago, there were almost no female sports writers in this country. And Bob Hammel first hired Tracy Dodds, who preceded me by about 2 years, and then hired me. That wasn't done back then.
His willingness to mentor young talent helped launch the career of a New York Times best-selling author who ventured into the Herald-Times newsroom for a meeting with Hammel while still a student at Bloomington High School North.
A few things really stood out there. One being how remarkably generous Bob was. He had no reason to give me this time. I also realized very quickly how serious he was about the craft of writing. I've never heard anyone talk about the craft with that level of exacting focus.
The main focus of Hammel's coverage was Indiana University football and basketball, which included traveling to cover Hoosier athletes and 5 Olympics. Hammel was inducted into the IU Athletics Hall of Fame in 2008 for his coverage, but an episode in the tumultuous late 60s, the IU football boycott by 10 African-American football players in 1969, left a lasting impression on him.
My carryover regret from that, and it's still true today, is that I didn't do more in an unprofessional way to step in and try to. I was one who could talk to them, and I was one who could talk to the football side and the administrative side, but I didn't do that.
Hammel moved to Bloomington for a job at the then Herald Telephone in 1966 after brief stints at papers in his hometown of Huntington, Kokomo, and Indianapolis. And Hammel made it his home until his passing last weekend. His legacy will be a smart, funny, thoughtful man who reveled in celebrating sports success rather than piling on.
there's so much chance to athletics that I never was brash enough to think that I knew the answers. I just tried to report what happened.
For Indiana News Desk, I'm Pat Bean.
An unusual man, Bob Hammel. Central and southern Indiana continue to experience persistent heat and humidity with little relief in sight. Since June 1, Indiana has logged more than 1,000 hours of dew points above 60 degrees, the longest stretch since records began in 1931. Dew points above 60 often indicate noticeable humidity, with values above 70 being oppressive. Temperatures are expected to hover around 90 degrees through next week. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at ipb.org. Have a great weekend. Thanks.
Indiana News Desk is made possible in part by Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. On the web at lawngp.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson, attorneys at law since 1949, utilizing experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.